So last time Geshe Dadal gave a BBC, he was asking, is it possible to develop certain Buddhist realizations? And I kind of piped up with this cohort in crime and said something about Nagarjuna and these, also something from one of the Buddhist traditions, Tibetan Buddhist traditions from the Sakya about these four authenticities. So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit today because it goes to the topic of faith and kind of what that is in a Buddhist context. And so we have this verse, the thing that came to mind for me is that from Nagarjuna, where he said, in brief, the method for attaining like realizations is summarized as faith and wisdom. And so faith, in the way we think about it in Buddhism, is actually kind of confidence. It's not like a blind faith. It's maybe more a reasoned faith. You take a look at things and you check them out. And in Buddhism, we have ideas that are quite important, like karma and the Four Noble Truths and things like that. But basically, it's a process where we learn and think about things, and by doing that, our confidence increases. And we check them out by putting things into practice and seeing what happens, seeing how things work. And so Nagarjuna went on to say, due to having faith, one relies on the practices. And due to having wisdom, one truly understands. So we get a little, like in most things in life, we get a little bit of understanding of something, a little bit of confidence in something, and we check it out enough that we're going to try it out. We just don't go for anything. And then once we stick with something for a long time, we actually learn a lot about it. So one thing about developing wisdom is it clears away confusion. And in the Buddhist sense, there's, I would say, two main ways to think about that, and they relate to this topic. One is the wisdom of the ultimate reality, which I'm not talking about today. But the other is more, what do you want to adopt and what do you want to abandon in your life? How do we lead a life that helps us develop our spiritual aspirations and our values and live in the way we want to live? So Nagarjuna went on to say that of these two, wisdom is foremost, but faith must come first. So then the question is, well, how do you develop this faith? And one of the ways that the Dalai Lama found useful, and our abbess wrote about in one of the books, I think it's Approaching the Buddhist Path, is these four authenticities. And I think these are actually quite interesting to look at in your own life, in your own experience. So that's why I decided to talk about this, so that you could think about this and see if it works for you in any religious tradition, maybe. But here we're speaking mostly about Buddhism. So these are four factors, and these are having the authentic teachings of the Buddha, which we have as sutras, and then authentic commentaries, authentic teachers, and then our own authentic experience. And so actually that's kind of how these developed. The Buddha was there first. He gave these teachings. They were written down in sutras. Then there were commentaries written. Great sages practiced these teachings, and then they taught their students, and the students had their own authentic experiences. So from our own perspective, it goes the reverse. We actually have our own experiences that we start with, and this is what we kind of rely upon. So this holiness found this to be very helpful. It helped him have more peace of mind, helped him to have a great appreciation for the Dharma. It gave him eventually conviction and belief in the commentaries and the sutras. But for my own experience, what I would like to talk about is how this kind of worked out in my own situation. When I first met Buddhism, I was going to two different centers in Seattle, and both of them were emphasizing the 10 non-virtues, these 10 destructive actions. And I happened to pick that up as a practice, and so every day for like a year and a half, I thought about these things. And without me trying to, this certain level of confusion left my mind. And I was thinking about this, like, okay, that's an experience I had that was quite strong for me. But I thought about this the last few weeks in preparation for today, and I was like, but why did that happen? Because as a kid, I had the 10 Commandments, and it didn't have the same impact. Well, one, I was kind of young, but also the model I was taught in was more like, not everything, but there was a lot of like a punishment model. Things were coming in from the outside, like, don't do this, do that. It was more from the outside. But when I met Buddhism, the worldview of Buddhism helped me to have different tools, but also there was this idea of being an insider. In fact, I think the word in Tibet means insider for Buddhist, if I have that right. And so that was something that resonated with me, like, yeah, this has to come from the inside, not something coming from the outside telling me do this, or this, but from my own sense of what I later learned is integrity. We all have our own, we develop our values in life, and then we try to live up to these values, and that is our sense of integrity. And that's quite an important thing to develop, and coming from the inside rather than the outside, I think, is what made these changes, because I saw in my own experience, like, wow, yeah, these things do cause harm. It's not like if I don't get caught, it doesn't matter, which is kind of how when I was young, and even when I wasn't so young, for small things, like I remember, what I really remember is the photocopy machine at work. Everybody would use it for their personal stuff, and nobody thought anything about it. And I think the reason this confusion dropped away from me is because there was so much stuff I saw in society that was just kind of fine. Everything was just fine because it didn't go to the level of like breaking the law or this or this or this. And even my mom, when I was young, said, she'd read the paper sometimes and she'd say, well, if you're going to be a thief and get caught, if you're going to be a thief, like, I guess she would read an article about somebody who actually had killed somebody and all they got was $1.25 out of it. She said, if you're going to be a thief, go big. So this is one of the messages I had. She said that twice when I was growing up. She was just like, why would you go to all this trouble and not get anything out of it? And so it's like, these are kind of confusing messages when on Sunday you're going to church and you have do not steal, and then you just have all these conflicting messages in the family, at school, and society, and whatever. So for my young mind, the 10 Commandments were very much external, and these 10 destructive actions that I saw value in giving up or working to give up, actions of body, speech, and mind that actually cause harm, that made a difference. And the other thing that is quite strong for me is, there's many things, but some of the big ones early on, and that still I have a lot of conviction in, or we have these teachings in Buddhism just about the method of how you go about it. These 3 wisdoms that we develop, the wisdom of learning, listening, the wisdom of contemplating or reflecting or debating and really getting to the meaning of something, and then the wisdom of meditation. For me, with many things in life, a lot of repetition is needed for most, playing the piano or sports or whatever it is, learning how to do math or anything. There's a lot of repetitions that needed. So having these methods, and methods that actually teach you how to learn, teach you how to look at things, and then help you to integrate these things, like with learning and listening, you're just kind of getting the words down, you're trying to understand what they're saying. But when you contemplate things, you try to delve into the meaning and really understand things in a deeper way. And then when you meditate on things, really what you're trying to do is kind of integrate this into your life. And so that helps you to stabilize your understanding of things. And it actually, instead of like you're thinking about it, you become that. So instead of like, I'm thinking I should be a loving person, it's all up here like this person says something to me and I think I should be loving. It's more like, oh, I can apply these teachings and I can actually get rid of this anger I have and I can be loving towards someone who maybe I have difficulty with. So that's quite a different thing, even on a conventional level, even on our day-to-day life level, than just, like things coming from the outside. So yeah, there have been many things in the practices and in the teachings that have helped me to have trust. Even, every day things come up. Like yesterday I got upset about something and I realized, oh, this teaching I got about trust, like, oh, I've trusted something more than really that person could bear. Right away, it's like, oh, I don't have to be upset about this. I made a mistake here. And it's just like that. These things sometimes can turn your mind so quickly. That's our own experience. And then we take that and we build on it. So for my own practice, I would say that these little things like this, they kind of start to add up. And then you have like, wow, these guidance and teachings I've had have really been helpful. I have some faith and confidence in this teacher. And then they relied on the commentaries. Then you start reading those commentaries, and I really like Lama Tsongkhapa. I love reading certain things, and like there's just things that really like, wow, this is so clear. And so I have this conviction in that. And then from there, the sutras are a little harder to understand sometimes, but I'm starting to get the idea like, wow, I notice how much Lama Tsongkhapa quotes all these sutras. Maybe there's something to it. It kind of goes like that. And for the Dalai Lama, what he says is that because some things that we learn about, even early on in Buddhism, are things that we can't know so directly. Eventually we want things to come back to our direct experience, but some things, like, for example, the specific detail workings of karma, like, they're obscure. Like, it'd be hard to say all the things that happened that led up to an event. In general, we know what goes around comes around, things like that. But for the specifics, we don't. And there's some things like that where you actually have to have some amount of trust to even put it into practice, right? We have to have some amount of conviction to even entertain that we might do this. So that's where having some kind of faith helps. And then we can use this faith to keep us going in our practice as we develop our wisdom. So I think that's really, I don't know, I just love these kind of teachings because they're accessible to my mind. I use them in my everyday life.